You're listening to The Download on thelinknewspaper.ca. Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of The Download, the podcast where we look at some of the stories appearing in this week's edition of the Link newspaper. I'm your host, Matt Damour. Several thousand Montrealers took to the streets this past Sunday ahead of the UN Climate Summit, including a contingent of Concordia University students. The Montreal event was part of a worldwide initiative to raise awareness of climate change and saw over 300,000 people marching in New York City alone. Ahead of the marches, author and activist Naomi Klein was in Montreal to talk about her new book, This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate. News editor Noelle Didier-Jean sat down with Klein for an interview. Here's a short excerpt.
You know, when I was writing the book, I thought a lot of people would want to argue with me about the science, or like, no, we don't need to change so radically, you know, we can do this with, like, you know, market mechanisms. And so far nobody is making that argument to me. I'm having an argument about whether or not it's possible, right? And to me, that's not really a question that we answer rationally. It's a choice that we make as human beings about whether we're going to have hope or not, right? And if we all give up, we will definitely lose, you know, and the more of us choose not to, the better our chances are that we won't. But yeah, I find I'm doing a lot of therapy as opposed to interviews, which I understand, but you know, it's interesting. It's not at all what I expected the response of the book to be so far. It's really, there seems to be a huge amount of consensus that we are just headed towards Armageddon. And the argument is whether or not there's any reason to hope at all.
Our news editor also shares a unique perspective on her interview with Klein. Turns out, you have to be wearing the right kind of shoes to conduct such a high-profile interview.
Meeting Naomi Klein was a little nerve-wracking. I never expected to interview such a large name working at a college paper, and I had a little bit of an internal struggle leading up to the interview. My shoes, purchased for $10 at Value Village, were the kind of orthopedic miracle you know someone's grandma died in. I love them dearly and wore them to death, literally. They're stained and cracked and weathered, and the left side flaps when I walk. So on the one hand, I'm interviewing a very well-known author and activist, practically a legend, and it seems disrespectful to wear such fucked up shoes. On the other hand, her focus is anti-capitalism and anti-consumerism. I mean, her first book was called No Logo. In the end, I wore the shoes. I've always preferred shabbiness to hypocrisy.
News editor Noelle Didier-Jean. In other news, our current affairs editor reports on a pageant, but not of the Miss America variety. No, this was a bit more interesting. Here's Verity Stevenson.
It was a rally that was at Parc Émilie Gamelin, and it was actually a uterus pageant. So there were about 40 people who were there for the rally, but for reproductive justice, which is, decrying the lack of reproductive services access in the world, in Canada and more remote areas, and especially in New Brunswick, where more recently the only abortion clinic closed. So there were about 7 women dressed in uterus dresses that were, painted in pink and red and had glitter on them, and they had some string here and there and flowers, and they held the pageant and the rally in the park on Saturday ahead of the New Brunswick election Monday, which saw Brian Gallant win.
Now, I might imagine that an event like this might garner a little bit of controversy. Did the onlookers seem to be enjoying the sight? Was there any dissent?
No dissent at all. There was, a couple of people watching, but also at Parc Émilie Gamelin, often there are rallies, and I think people in Montreal are just kind of used to it.
So reproductive justice is a term originally coined in the United States by organizations that promote the rights of Native women and women of color. And it locates the fulfillment of sexual and reproductive autonomy in the larger sphere of reproductive justice. I would say that it's necessary to support the leadership and power of the most excluded groups, most excluded women of color and girls of color and Indigenous communities within a culturally relevant context.
That was the Center for Gender Advocacy's campaign coordinator Maya Robingani speaking at the uterus pageant this past Saturday. We move on now to our recap of all things athletic with our sports editor, Julian McKenzie.
The Concordia Stingers men's football team is now ranked number 9 in the country according to the latest CIS rankings after their most recent win over the Sherbrooke Verreor 29-22. This is the first time since 2006 the Concordia Stingers football team has started 3-0. Quarterback Francois Desereau had a strong aerial attack, throwing for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. Unfortunately, in the game, their rookie running back Gunnar Tatum went down with an injury, but there is no word on whether he will be available for the team's next game, which is against St. Mary's on Saturday. The Concordia Stingers baseball team was also in action over the weekend. They had a doubleheader on Sunday against Carleton University. Carleton won their first encounter 6-4, but Concordia got their revenge in Game 2 with a 10-0 victory. They had to call the game by mercy rule in the 5th inning. The Stingers men's soccer team still has yet to record a victory on the season. On Sunday, they played against the Sherbrooke Verreor, and they lost 1-0. They are winless after their first 5 games of the season. The women's team did not fare much better either, as they too lost to Sherbrooke on Friday, this time 3-0. Men's hockey. The Stingers men's hockey team had 2 preseason games against the Université de Trois-Rivières, and they were spanked in both games. Last Wednesday, the Stingers were blown out 9-3, and they didn't fare much better in their second encounter, a 6-2 loss. But relax, it is the preseason. The Stingers are 1-2 in their preseason. Their lone win coming against the McGill Redmen a few weeks back, a 5-4 overtime win.
Now, Julian, this last Saturday you attended a pretty interesting charity basketball game. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
PopMontreal was holding its 3rd annual Pop versus Jock event. It's a charity basketball game benefiting this Montreal sports club, DJ Sports. There's a whole list of celebrities who show up. One of the more notable celebrities, the Arcade Fire lead singer, Butler. He brought out his brother to the game. His wife, Regine, was providing halftime entertainment.
It's always hard to raise money for that kind of community work, and so we're trying to get the idea of an annual event that could kind of like build some infrastructure. So that was kind of the idea of bringing in McGill and Concordia both to kind of have it be a Montreal event, and PopMontreal, which is going to happen every year. So you have this kind of anchor, and it keeps getting better every year. So I've been really happy with it. I'd love to get Kanye out to a game. He can play too. He's got some good handles. And he's going to have the best shoes on the court.
Justin Vernon from Bon Iver was there as well.
Wynn just asked me to come, and I couldn't say no. It was a super fun opportunity. I just think that, music and sports are far too separated sometimes, and it's just good to see a bunch of musicians and athletes supporting, opportunity for little kids to have a place to go and play sports and stuff. It's great.
They were all taking part in a game where they were playing against athletes from Concordia Stingers and the McGill Redmen basketball teams. They went at it. It was a very entertaining game, but the Pop team with Win Butler, among others, came out victorious 101-92.
Sports editor Julian McKenzie. We end this week with a few thoughts on everyone's favorite online learning platform. Photo and video editor Sean Michaud.
It started with a murmur, students speaking in hushed tones in the hallways, talking about a revolution. Rumor had it there was finally an upgrade, but alas, as you logged into Moodle this morning, the same old interface mocked you with its snail-like speed, its outdated graphics, and its predictable unreliability. Moodle is the antithesis of artificial intelligence, a throwback to 1997, a troglodyte prancing on Times Square. You found it hilarious the first time you used it. That was before you had to submit work through the lagging Neanderthal. Now it's crushing your dreams of a decent GPA. Like a dumbed-down version of Skynet, it has chewed bits and pieces of your academic career. Profs are forced to use it in teaching their courses since there is no other option. The university has refused to put Moodle to pasture. So teachers keep imposing the wretched software, muttering the tired old mantra, an upgrade is coming this year, it'll get better, you'll see. All are hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Now students have become more vocal about the situation. Moodle has got to go, no doubt. We have a computer science department in this school. Why not trust it with creating something user-friendly? I'm not advocating patching up the roof. I'm calling for the digital revolution that we deserve. Slay the dragon, or at least euthanize it. Know what I'm saying?
That was photo and video editor Sean Michaud. Well, that's it for this week, but remember that you can read these stories and many more in our weekly print edition and online at thelinknewspaper.ca. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.